They had such high ventilation that it just swept all the radon away with everything else. But you have this culture of monitoring for carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, nitrous oxides, methane, and anything else that might be coming out of the rock that's indicated by whatever you happen to be pulling out of the ground. So there will be a ventilation engineer going around the mine at various points saying, where's the air coming from? Where's it going to? How fresh is my air? And if you've got a working face that's 400 meters or a kilometer underground, that air is going to be moving through quite a restricted space and picking up loads of radon en route. So you have to think about where you've got the fresh air coming in. Do you need an extra source of fresh air? Which way is the air naturally moving? And it will change at different times of year. Now, underground in most hard rock mines in this country, the temperature is about 10 to 12 Celsius. Now, how does that change as time goes on? It's 20 plus degrees out there. You've got cold air in a mine. As soon as it reaches the surface, it will get heated and it will move away. So you'll have this extracting ventilation and you'll be literally pulling the radon out of the rock. In the winter, you could get the reverse effect. You could get cold air literally pouring into a mine and pushing back the radon where it came from. And then you tend to get much lower radon concentrations underground in the winter than you do in the summer. And that's the exact opposite from what you tend to find in a building. So you have to get your head around various things like that. And it can change different times of day. Do you have vehicles moving around? Do you actually have some forced ventilation underground? Are you working the opposite direction of the natural ventilation? Do you have to clear fumes? Do you have blasting fumes? Do you have vehicle fumes? So you've got lots and lots of different things to think about. And you are in this very, very constrained environment. So the top picture there is actually a gypsum mine. Give you some idea of scale, it's about 3 meters from top to bottom. So some very, very large wheels and very large equipment. They can't hear you, you just have to get out of the way. Second one down is a plan of a mine. That's called a pillar and hall mine. It looks like a vast underground car park. It's like pillars and gaps and pillars and gaps, but these pillars are very, very wide and they're the only thing holding up the roof. So how do you model a mine like that? We actually treat it like the ventilation circuit is treated like an electrical circuit. So you can do it in terms of resistors and series and parallel circuits. And it works out quite neatly. So that's what your ventilation engineer will be looking at. What you also have to take into account is the equilibrium factor, or more the disequilibrium between the radon gas and the radon progeny. If you've got an enclosed environment, then the radon progeny will be sort of pretty much one-to-one with the radon gas. And that's what you can get in the bottom of, say, a gypsum mine. You've got 9 square kilometers of underground environment. You're a long way from any fresh air source. The air is pretty much stationary. So the radon progeny has time to grow in. In a lot of hard rock mines, you don't have such a big, huge, complicated system. So they tend to have an equilibrium factor about 0.5. In rough terms, it's about half what you'd expect from what you'd predict from the radon gas. If you can just measure the radon daughters and the radon gas simultaneously. And it's a bit of a faff to do. And one of the hardest problems with that is actually finding equipment now that will do it, because so many regulations have gone to radon gas. People don't really want to measure radon daughters anymore. It's something of a niche market. So finding equipment that can actually do that for you these days is becoming a bit of a problem. And it will vary throughout the day, because that's the story with radon. It's variable. Whatever you've got, when you think you've got it there, it's going to vary. Up, down, 1 minute to the next, 1 hour to the next, day, weeks, months, any quantity you want. It's just going to vary. So how do you measure it? Well, you've got 2 different sorts of radon detectors. This is more familiar to me. These are the ones I tend to work with the environmental radon detectors. They're black because we put carbon in the shell. Not so easy to find underground, but they're fine if you're just in an ordinary workplace. It's PADC, CR39 plastic, same as I've got in my glasses here. Slight change in the recipe to stop it hazing when we chemically etch it. So you can see the before on the left, on the top right picture. Afterwards, you're literally shattering the polymer of the plastic with the alpha particles from the radon gas decaying. The radon can percolate in through the detector. Let's see if this laser wants to work for me. Yes, it does, just about. So the air comes in through the 2 halves of the shell that snap together. They work their way into the active chamber. you've got the CR39 plastic underneath, and you cause a damage track. So this is the principle behind it. And these things were developed in the 1980s for a national survey. They were yellow at the time, and you'll see the personal ones still are yellow. But they work very well. We produced millions of those things, had them made under license for us as well. And we can also put them in radon permeable waterproof bags. That will keep them safe from dust, moisture. You can also use them in radioactive contamination areas, because it gives health physics a chance to monitor the outside of the bag. Meanwhile, the detector is safe inside. It's still recording the radon, but everything nasty is kept to the outside. So the number of detectors you need depends on the size of the workplace. And with a mine, you really have to go for what are the active areas, what are the roadways, where are the travel ways that they go through to get to their main working area. Do you have one working face? Do you have 5 working faces? How many people underground? What's your ventilation route? So that's where you have to work with a ventilation engineer, or just look at a plan and experience will tell me, right, you need one on the entrance, one on the exit, and all the different areas in between. The other way of doing it is a personal monitor. So you can see fundamentally it's the same design. It's yellow, so you can actually find it underground. And these are the ones that have gone through the approved dosimetry service. So if we were to change things about it, we'd have to have it reapproved. It's an electrochemical etching, which is why you can see just a circular pattern of the damage tracks. So if you're above 300 becquerel per meter cubed, then the ionizing radiations regulations apply. You work out what your dose is likely to be, mostly from a guess on the working time and the average radon concentration. So it really is quite a rough estimate, because it doesn't take into account too many variations. So if you have some very high results, or you're expecting results above 6 millisievert per year, you're into controlled areas, all that sort of thing, then you should be looking at personal monitoring. Now, you do need compliance from the people. Rather than just parking a detector in place, you leave it there for a while, a month, 3 months underground, and collect it away. You have to have somebody wearing it every day. They have to remember to put it on, they have to remember to take it off, and put it in the right location. Too many times we have seen personal monitors where somebody took it home every night and their house had a high radon concentration, and it came through with a phenomenal dose, and there was an investigation and the management were not happy, because you have to be very, very careful with the control detectors. And the other thing is, you also need to know about the equilibrium factor. Because you're just measuring the radon gas and the dose is mostly connected to the radon progeny, you have to know your equilibrium factor. And for a hard rock mine, for instance, this one I'm talking about today, Stoke Hill, we use an equilibrium factor of 0.5. That's a good, robust value. So a bit more about personal monitors. As you can see, here is a control location. They've got people hanging up their badges at the end of the day. Now, in mines, you have a thing called a tally board. So often you'll be picking up a detector so we know who's underground. It's got your name on it, and you pick up your detector at the same time so we can see who's in and out of the mine. It's just a physical system of seeing who's underground should anything go wrong, rather than just sort of relying on an electronic system. What if the power goes off? It's that kind of thing. So most workers in radon atmospheres, they don't wear personal monitors. Should more people wear them? I think so, because we can get some very, very high results. Because in a mine, 300 becquerel per meter cubed, that is the threshold for the ionizing radiations regulations, 2017. 2,000 hours, okay, that's a full working year. You're already above 2 millisievert. Now, 300 becquerel per meter cubed is quite a modest radon concentration for a mine. So, what sort of things can you do if you find yourself with a high radon concentration? Well, let's take it back a step. What is Bath stone anyway? A few million years ago, Bath and that whole area of northeast Somerset was under a shallow sea. Plesiosaurs were swimming around that area, and as small creatures were dying, they fell to the bottom of the sea, and as these little tiny particles rolled around, they gradually built up layers of limestone. And it's like sort of concentric layers, like an onion. These things got consolidated together to give you kind of frog spawny texture, and it was a nice colour beige, and that's what we call Bath stone. And there is a bylaw in Bath that if you have any building there, it's got to be built, faced, or pretty much look like it's made of Bath stone, just to keep everything nice and beige and pretty. So where's the radon coming from? Well, you actually still get a few parts per million of uranium, just because of the waters that were there, anything that's flowed through it ever since. So you don't have very much uranium at all, but what you do have is the porosity. So it can very, very easily get to the surface. If you want to see a nice example of a limestone, just look at the great orm and the little orm either side. That's a nice limestone for you. Rather different one, though. So it's a drift mine, which means you don't go down a shaft, Stoke Hill. You actually can drive in or walk in. So it's been in operation for several hundred years, actually pulling out this Bath stone. Now, you're not wanting to blast it. You're not wanting to sort of cut little bits off. You want nice, big blocks, like, a meter or more in size. So you have to cut it out very, very carefully. So what happened? Well, taking back from we took on the RPA role, they had a new mines inspector. A mines inspector who knew about radon, mainly because their previous mine had high radon levels. In the past, all the mines inspectors had to be the managers or under managers of a large coal mine. They changed that with the Hazardous Installation Inspectorate to recognize the fact that large coal mines were closed. So it's hard rock mine managers are now coming through. So this particular mines inspector wanted to spread the joy and said, have you done some radon measurements? To which the result was, yeah, maybe, yeah, radon, what about it? So anyway, did some radon measurements. They came through to the service that I manage. And when we get some very high results, they flag across my desk and they go, is this real? Does this look real to you? This is incredibly high. What about the rest of the detectors? So it had already flagged up. We found there were high results. They obviously needed an RPA, which is when the RPA service, when I'm looking down at Jonathan Fawcett here, who started with their early RPA work. So investigated various methods to actually reduce the radon concentration. So we used equilibrium factor, once again I say 0.5, that's quite nice and robust, and about 15 to 20 people actually needed personal monitoring. So this is what it looks like underground. This is Stoke Hill Mine. As you can see, it's quite high. Once again, you've got quite a height there. That's Rebecca, who's one of the authors of this particular presentation. So, institute a positive pressure ventilation system. As I said, let's just push the radon back where it came from. You're often working against the natural ventilation, but let's not try and sort of extract it all because you've got basically an infinite source of radon. Let's just push it back where it came from. So what you can see here is some trunking in the left-hand picture. That's pushing fresh air to where you need it, because you are hundreds of meters away from the entrance of the mine and the source of the fresh air. Here, on the right, you can see where they have actually blocked in what was basically a big doorway. So if you block it in, you actually simplify the ventilation circuit and make life easier, so you get the fresh air to where you need it more quickly and don't lose it in old parts of the mines that you're not really using anymore. And that's all there is to it. It's very straightforward. This is why you need to work with the ventilation engineer to make sure it's right. So they know the mine itself, the working patterns, the current ventilation, and what the essential requirements are. Are they clearing diesel fumes, that sort of thing. So it works. Let us see how well it works. You can see the original results back in 2016 and 2019 when they instigated the ventilation system. Now, there's quite a difference between those two, which just goes to show how massively effective it can be. And as you can see, with results of 3,500 becquerel per meter cube, this is why it came across my desk. We are more than 10 times the threshold for the IRR. I said you're getting more than 2 millisievert per year at 300 becquerel per meter cube. Well, let's just look at the personal dosimetry. Monthly results, 1.5 millisievert per month. Now let's work that out in a year. That's 20 millisievert per year. So you're actually on the dose limit. That's a lot of dose. And as you can see, as the ventilation systems were sorted out, as the mitigation came in, the results just dropped like a stone. a bathstone. So, sorry, I wasn't intending to do that. So you go down to very, very low results, and that shows what you're doing is working. You're not just estimating doses from average concentrations and exposure time. What it does is show you unequivocally that your individual, in the way they work, their individual working patterns, massive, massive amount of dose saved. So, conclusions. Lots of conclusions here. So, it works. You measure the radon concentration, you find out how to fix it, you mitigate it, and your personal exposure drops very, very sharply. So you've identified the problem and you've changed the ventilation. That's all good. Now, this required the inspector to remind them. So what's the twist here? The twist is that Stoke Hill Mine came up high in the mine surveys in 1991 and 1994 and 95. And I know that because I was their RPA. I did the work with them. I went to the mine a number of times. I talked to the people there and the manager, and we were getting a ventilation system in place with all sorts of trunking. It was great. It was working a treat. And then they had a new manager who said, I'm not interested in radon. The inspector doesn't call about it. They're asking about other things. We don't need you anymore. So what we've had is 20 years of high dose. 20 years, 20 people, 20 millisieverts a year. So each person got about 0.4 sievert that they didn't need to. If you want to talk about collective dose, 8-man sievert, shouldn't that be a person sievert these days? So that's the twist. It's a bit of sort of disappointing for me. I shouldn't be standing here talking to you about this success story because it should have been maintained and fixed 20 or more years ago. So that's why it's a bit of a twist, and that's why I'm slightly disappointed. So you can do it, but what you need is the inspectors that keep on at the managers who engage. So acknowledgement, thanks to Jonathan Fawcett, who did a lot of the early work, even though he did defect to Nuvia at some point during that. And for more information, I'm sure some of you have been talking to Hugh and Shakira on the UK HSA stall. We're here next time. I don't know what it'll be called next time. But you see, we're on new colour scheme now. So it's still pretty much the same people in the same building doing the same stuff. So we've got the experience. We know what to do. All we need now is for the inspectors to inspect. Right. Thank you. Thank you.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, Tracy. We've got a few questions through on the app, but firstly, open it up to the floor. Has anybody got any questions? Just the gentleman just there.
Hi, Tracy. It's Mark Lyons here from L2. Great presentation. I just wondered, I suppose very similar feeling to yourself, did the HSA take any action against the mine for the legacy of poor management in respect of rad protection or not?
It's different managers, that's the thing.
Well, different company, different employee. Did they do anything about it?
Not that I'm aware of. Jonathan, did you? No, you didn't hear anything either. No, as far as we know, no. I mean, it was a new mines inspector who was familiar with high radon in their previous mine, but I think it's just an awareness that it hadn't been inspected. And they were talking about radon. They'll be thinking about slips, trips, and falls, the roof falling on your head, machinery running over people, that sort of thing. But radon just wasn't mentioned. So it's actually a failure of the inspector.
We have some very similar clients to yours, and it's interesting. Of all the clients we have, and ours are now improved, thanks to our help, but they are the highest dose burden clients we have on any sector. And yet HSE don't appear to be very interested in it, which I find
I talked about sieverts.
Unbelievable.
Sieverts just now.